So, would you be surprised if I told you that the drive that is going to create the change behind all of those goals that you might be setting is not driven most of the time by inspiration and excitement? More often than not, there's one thing that drives your motivation and is at the core of every single change or breakthrough that you've created in your life. And in this week's episode of Weekly Momentum, I'm going to show you a breakthrough matrix, and we're going to dive into the anatomy of a breakthrough so that you can see for yourself. I'm going to show you how you can learn from your own experience with your own breakthroughs over the last year so that you can consciously create in a much more pleasant way more breakthroughs and more change as we step into the next year. So if that all sounds like fun, join me in this week's episode of Weekly Momentum. I know everybody gets caught up in goal setting at this time of year, and I'm a huge fan of that. But what a lot of people miss is that underneath the surface of the words that you're using for the goals, you want to make sure that you understand what's driving those goals so that you make sure that you're successful with them and that they don't just fizzle out before you've even really gotten started with them. If you peel back the layers of any goal that you set, what's underneath it is fundamentally one thing, and that is that you want to create some kind of change, that you want things to be different than the way they are right now. So, underneath every single goal is a desire for change, which leads to the question, if you want to be over here and you're over here, why not just go over there, right? Why not just do the thing, right? A lot of people set goals as if that were the truth, that they could just decide that they wanted to go from A to Z and they would go to Z. What really is going on is that there is some kind of barrier. It could be psychological, it could be mental, it could be physical. There is some kind of wall that you have to break through to get from where you are to where you want to be. And that is why breakthroughs are such an important part of the conversation when you're thinking about setting goals. So, wouldn't you agree that if you understand how you've had breakthroughs in the past and what a breakthrough actually means and how it happens, if you were to understand that process better, that you would then be able to reverse engineer that and use that information to help you break through in the future, maybe in a much more comfortable, enjoyable way than you have in the past. That's what we're going to explore today. So last year, I invented a new tool. I love inventing new tools. And it's a framework that I inserted into your breakthrough year, which is my annual planning program. If you want to learn more about that, I'll drop the link in the description below. This is a matrix that allows you to step back through the critical steps and stages of a breakthrough that you've had in your own experience in the past so you can learn through your own experience. I'm going to take you through all of these steps today and explain all of them to you clearly. This is a tool that is going to help you in your annual and big picture goal setting. Then, once you have those really tight and solid, you can then use them to realign every week when you do your weekly momentum. So weekly momentum needs the framework. It needs the structure of these bigger vision, this bigger goals. And today we're going to really dive into the anatomy of a breakthrough, which is the core, the heart behind any goal that you will ever set. Yes, I'm a little bunged up today. I'm really sweaty and a little feverish, but I really wanted to do this podcast. So here I am. I'm so jazzed about this right now because I came up with this tool last year and I used it with all of my clients to create their annual blueprint, and they loved it. And it was really great to see the aha moments and for them to understand the anatomy of their breakthroughs. And then what's exciting for me is that then now we're using it this year for the second year. And with a better understanding, as I'm going through the anatomy of breakthrough for the last year, it's giving me so much insight. It's really giving me a better depth and understanding of my evolution and how I've learned and grown over the last year. Some of the breakthroughs are not quite complete yet, but I can clearly see that they're in motion. I've taken myself through 2025 on the lookout for all of my breakthroughs using the breakthrough matrix. And then I'm going to share with you my breakthroughs so that I can help you understand each of the steps, and then you can go ahead and use the tool on your own. It's super simple. You don't need much more than a pen and paper and 4 or 5 columns on the sheet. I'm gonna be completely upfront. It's a whole gamut of different things. There are some things which have been brewing for decades, while others are little frivolous breakthroughs that I've had that have given me a lot of joy and insight. And they're in all areas of my life because if you know me and how I do my strategic planning, you know that as small business owners, we cannot exclude the rest of our life. So when we're talking about breakthroughs here, it's not just in business, it's breakthroughs in your whole life because when you have a breakthrough in your spirituality or your family or your relationships or your health and well being, the ripple effects are going to come over into your business and how you show up and your confidence. And the trajectory of your business is going to be impacted by all the areas, all the 12 areas that I talk about in your breakthrough year. And I want to shout out and say a heartfelt thank you because I've received so many emails and text telling me that when I share my stories, that they dovetail into your own life and it's really helpful for you. So even though some of these stories are really vulnerable, one of them in particular, I'm going to give you a spoiler here. It's a bit of a tearjerker, but I feel like this is helpful for me to share from the heart my breakthroughs so that you can begin to pave the way and understand your own breakthroughs from the last year and then begin to understand the anatomy of breakthrough so you can create even more momentum as you step into the next year. One last thing I want to mention is the way that I came up with these breakthroughs is in your breakthrough year, the program, there is an entire module on taking inventory of the last year. That is always the first thing that I do. I went month by month over the last year in a very specific way that's laid out in this program so that I could mine for gold and really understand what happened last year. I wouldn't have been able to see all of the breakthroughs if I hadn't have done that step first. So I do encourage you to do your own rewind of last year and take inventory. Okay, your breakthrough year is a matrix, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns so that they lay out the anatomy, the process, and the triggers behind every breakthrough that you have. The first column is just a place for you to write down what was that breakthrough, what was that change. And most of the time, what it's going to be, honestly, is a change in your belief. Like you're going to believe something different than you did before because it's going to be different. You're going to see different. You're going to feel different. So ultimately, what is going to lie underneath any breakthrough that you have is a completely different way of looking and seeing things because you believe differently. So that's usually what's underneath things. And I'm going to start out with a really silly example, but it was a breakthrough that I had in December, which I think is a really fun way for us to start. So I used to believe that if I wanted my nails to look good, right, and they don't look great right now, so don't look at them today. But if I wanted my nails to look good, I had to go to the salon. I had to have my nails done. I'm not very good at doing my nails, bottom line. And I had seen my daughter playing with stick-on nails before and always thought it was like a childish thing, that they didn't really last, that they would fall off and they looked kind of fake. And so I just kind of believed that they weren't a legitimate option to make my hands feel good and look good and feel sexy. I don't know why it is, ladies, right? But when we have our nails done, we just feel really good. So I had this breakthrough in December, which was all around this idea of stick-on nails, right? And trust me, we're going to get a lot deeper than this, but this is the one I want to start with because I want to make sure that you understand all the different stages, and this is a really easy one to do it with. So my breakthrough around stick-on nails started with the belief that they were cheap and that they came off and they were for kids, right? So that was the first column, the breakthrough. The second column and the trigger that I alluded to in the opening of this episode for pretty much every single breakthrough you'll ever have is going to be disgust. You're going to have some level of disgust. It sounds so dramatic, doesn't it? And what we can play with as we understand the anatomy of a breakthrough is that that level of disgust can be gentler on us if we recognize it sooner. So, the thing that we're looking out for that you're going to realize on your own as you do this for yourself is that every breakthrough that you had came from a place of disgust. So, I was really disgusted with my nails. They were thin, they were peeling, they were cracking. I can't paint them myself. This is a very light, easy example. But what was happening with my nails was that I just was a bit disgusted by my hands. I would always think, well, I don't want to do videos about the planner because I don't want to show my hands. I don't want to show my nails. And so I was feeling disgust around the way my nails looked. And then the next column is decision. So when did I make a decision to do something differently? So from the disgust, at some point we can choose to do something differently. We can make a decision. And what was the trigger for that was that I was at the hospital and I was just getting just a regular test done, nothing dramatic. And one of the staff there had really pretty nails, and I complimented her. And then she started going on and on about the kind of nails that she used and how they were stick on and where she got them from. And honestly, at the time, I was really not that interested, but she went on about it in so much detail and with so much passion and went through exactly how to do it and how long they stayed on and how great they were. She sold me. And it's another great example of how sales isn't so much about that the person is interested in what you're selling, it's that you're passionate enough about what you're selling that the person gets interested in what you're talking about, right? So this was a great example of that for us in our businesses. And so she was so excited that by the time I left the hospital, I decided I was going to go and I was going to buy this exact brand of nails that she had told me about. She told me how to do it. And I was going to buy some for myself, some for my daughter, put them in our stockings for Christmas Eve, and then we could put them on Christmas Day. So that was the decision I made. And I went to the store and I bought the nails. So then in the desire column, which is the next column, there's a before and after. So before I made the change to decide to put on the new nails, once again, my hands felt like they were ugly. I had ugly hands. I'm using this as an example, right? Afterwards, we're going to look at the before and after. So after I put these nails on, which literally took no time at all, I felt confident. I felt like I had sexy hands, right? So there was a dramatic difference, a before and after of this breakthrough that I'm using as the example here. And the final column is the determination. And that is reminding us that when we have a breakthrough, yes, there is the moment that we decide and we go off on that journey and we create the change. We choose something different. We choose to think something different or do something different. However, the breakthrough doesn't end there. There is a level of determination. There is a staying the course that we need to do. There's going to be things that are wanting to lure us back to the way things were before, to not stay on track, right? To fall off the wagon. And so this determination column is there to remind us how determined we are and how we've been determined in the past. So in terms of this silly little frivolous example of the nails, I put them on upside down, some of them. My daughter laughed at me, right? But I was determined. I was happy with them. They still felt like they looked good. A couple of them did fall off because I hadn't done it quite right, but I glued them back on again. And everything being said and done, I'm converted. I'm now all in for the stick-on nails, right? So that was a really simple, easy example that I wanted to use to start with. And once again, let me remind you of the columns of the stages of the breakthrough, and then we'll go into some other examples that I'm going to share with you. First of all, you just write down what the breakthrough is. And then in the next column, which is discuss, you point towards, you remind yourself of, well, where was there disgust, which is literally the trigger that is really causing you to want to create some kind of change, right? I was disgusted by my nails, and that triggered me to want to have my nails done, right? And then I made the decision, because of the lady at the hospital, to go ahead and experiment with something different. The next column is desire. This is really about the emotion behind the change. And we look at the before and after to remind ourselves how we felt before and how we felt afterwards. because that is part of what really drives the change is the shift in how we're feeling. I was feeling like I had ugly hairs, and afterwards I felt more confident, more sexy, more professional. And then the final column is determination, and this is where you are gonna write down how you kept yourself on track. What did you do when you fell off the wagon? So for me, when the nails fell off, I glued them back on, I put them on upside down, I just let it go. That was my determination column. So there's 4 Ds, basically, 4 Ds, and each of the breakthrough is gonna go through all of those stages. So another breakthrough that I feel like is bubbling up, it's definitely gonna need a little bit longer for it to solidify, but it's starting to bubble up and break through, is all around the idea that I've just gotta finish everything. I just need to finish all of my projects and be done with everything to get to this place, this future that I imagine. The challenge with that belief that I am never done, which I've talked about in other episodes, so you can see it's definitely something that's front of mind for me. The fact that I'm always feeling like I'm never done steals my peace because I'm always thinking, I've got to get to this place of complete. I've got to get to this place of done. And what I realized, I had this aha moment as I looked around my home and I looked at the dishes and I was frustrated. The maid had just been, it had been clean and now here it was again. It's only a couple days later and the stovetop was dirty again. I was disgusted by the stovetop, right? I'm not saying that it was absolutely covered in food and rats were running around on it or anything like that. There was some specks of food on it, but there was a feeling, that feeling of disgust that bubbled up in me. And something happened in that moment when I had that trigger, when I had that moment of disgust. Something happened where I realized for the first time, there is no done. Now, in the past, when I've been having this conversation with myself and thinking about, I've got to get everything done, I've found ways to chip away at things and feel a sense of accomplishment and break things into smaller bites so I can still feel done. This was different. In this moment, it washed over me this feeling that there is never, ever completion. There is never done. And what happened was a sense of relief came over me, a sense of peace. And I know I have to lean into this some more for this to really take root in me. But in that moment, it gave me permission to let go of things that weren't tied up in a bow, to let go of things, to clear my plate of some things, and allowed me to do a lot of simplifying, a lot of getting rid of things, a lot of letting go of unfinished projects, a lot of creating this space because I was never going to get the space of finishing things, of being complete with all the projects. So I may as well just clear the space without being complete. Now, I don't know if I'm completely making sense here in what I'm saying. It reminds me a lot of unattachment. A fundamental part of Buddhist philosophy is that you are unattached to things. One way I've described it in the past is this idea of being happy with what is and hungry for more so that you're not desperate, right? I unhooked myself from the need for anything to be complete. So this breakthrough was around the idea of feeling like I just needed to complete things, that things had to be completed for me to have space or to move forward or to receive whatever it was that I was going to get from the thing I was working on. The disgust came from the dishes and the stovetop. The decision I made was to simplify and to let go of things. And if we look at the emotions before and after, before I made that decision, I felt behind, I felt overwhelmed, I felt in limbo. And then as I'm looking down at the matrix here, and then afterwards, I felt more present, I felt curious, and I felt open. So there was a definite shift of how I felt before and after I had this. And this is more of an esoteric breakthrough, right? This isn't like the nails, right? This is something that's a mind shift, a definite belief shift that I'm going to chip away with. And in terms of the final column, determination, what challenges have come up around it? Well, a software company that I was using went out of business. And I had to move a lot of the information very quickly out of that platform into another one. And I made the choice that it didn't have to be complete. I didn't have to do it perfectly. And I let go of quite a lot of stuff in that process. And I was at peace with that. And it was very different than I would have been in the past in the way that I would have done it. And I see it showing up in a lot of different ways. And so as I'm doing things now moving forward, I get reminded of this breakthrough of shifting my way of looking at what I'm working on. So the next breakthrough is a kind of fun one. It's around something from my past life, you might say. So for a couple of decades, I was an actress. And when my daughter was born, I felt like I was at a crossroads, and I made a choice that I could either continue with acting or pursue coaching. I felt in my mind that I couldn't dedicate the energy that I wanted to both things. And I quite happily chose coaching to be the thing that I pursued and was very happy about that decision. Over the last couple of decades, every year on a significant birthday, I've written and performed a one-woman show and satiated my appetite for acting. On my 40th birthday, I did the Zen of red wine, and on my 50th birthday, I did the Zen of hot yoga and actually won first place at a theater festival with it. I had a lot of fun. I didn't want it or need it to go any further than that. But this last year, there's been a little thing kind of nibbling away in my head, and it's been like acting, acting. I want to act, and so the breakthrough is. Before, I thought acting was something that I would just do on those significant birthdays, or that it was maybe just something that was in my past. The trigger, the thing that changed my belief around that was actually the show that I've absolutely adored watching is Stranger Things. I have loved it. I'm obsessed with it. I don't even understand. It's a bit gruesome. I don't like gruesome things, but I have been obsessed with watching Stranger Things. But it's not just been about watching the show. I've been enjoying watching 10 years of these actors growing up and evolving, and I've been fascinated by them, almost a little bit obsessed. And so I caught myself scrolling on social media in between the final episodes being released because I was so desperate for more Stranger Things. And I was a bit disgusted with myself in that I was wasting so much time. And why am I looking at all of these posts about Stranger Things and the Stranger Things actors? And why am I so obsessed? And then it hit me. The disgust made me realize that I was jealous, that I actually was craving to do some acting, to be in an amazing show like this that was so well written and directed and edited and acted. And so that disgust of the scrolling was the trigger. And then I made the decision. So I decided, you know what? I emailed the SAG after union. I had my membership on pause, and I emailed them and asked them, okay, what do I need to do to take it off pause? And they replied within a day, send me the link, and I can rejoin very easily. It was so easy. And so if I look at the emotion behind that, the before and after in the desire column, before there was a feeling of jealousy that had crept in that wasn't there when I made the choice to stop acting before. And so there was jealousy before and afterwards. Once I got that email and I realized how easy it would be, I don't know what I'm going to do about it. I'm not going to dash out and close my business and become an actor, but I love the idea that I can step back into that at whatever capacity I want to, and that feels exciting. So in the desire column, before we have jealousy, after we have excitement. And then in the determination column, I had a lovely hike with my friend. I still have a lot of friends who are actors. And I was just asking her questions about headshots and who she shot with and figuring out what to do because it felt like there was so many different barriers, challenges that were in my way. And I felt like I'm in the desert. I'm in Palm Springs. I don't live in LA anymore. How am I going to go ahead and go to auditions all of the time? How would I even begin to do this? And she reminded me that now a lot of the auditions is self-taped. I can do it from the desert. It's not a big deal. She recommended somebody to do the headshot. And that all helped really my determination, my sense of I can do this for that final column. So another breakthrough that I had this year was around my business. For 2 decades, I've had the name of the business has actually been the Women's Business Momentum Center. And I've created quite a lot of momentum with that. And it has, for me, it felt like it had credibility built into the title. And it felt like I really needed to hold on to that name. And then over the last year and a half, I've been working on fine tuning the business, rebranding a little bit. And every time I spoke to anyone, they were always really confused because there was so many names of things. There was the membership, the Momentum Squad, and there's the Women's Business Momentum Center, and I'm the Get It Done Diva. And it felt like there was so much to explain, but I wasn't willing to let go of any of the pieces. And the belief I had was that I had to keep the Women's Business Momentum Center name because it had so much credibility built into it. But the challenge with that was that I felt so much responsibility. When you think of Business Momentum Center, I felt like I needed to provide so much. And I was interested in all the elements of business, but with the responsibility of feeling like I needed to be on top of marketing and sales and technology and all of the pieces of branding and AI and everything with business, it all felt like a lot. And I felt like I wasn't able to deliver as well as I could because it felt like I was being pulled in a million different directions. But I was working with someone and we figured out that the only way that I could really hold on to the name, the Women's Business Momentum Center, and still really come across clearly and not confuse people was to have two separate brands, to have Women's Business Momentum Center and Get It Done Diva as two completely separate brands. And they said, that's going to be a lot of work to create a website for both, and you would have social media for both. And I was like, that's not a problem. I want both of them so much. I can see how they could be different, and I want to set it all up. And I started working on the websites. I started setting things up, and I just got to this moment of disgust, this moment of just frustration with how much work this was going to be. And that was the trigger when it finally landed that it was going to be so much work to do this. That was exactly the trigger I needed to choose something different. But I couldn't have gotten to that place without going down the path I went down. And I hope you're seeing that from a lot of these breakthroughs, and they're going to be true with your breakthroughs as well, that you may have gone down a path and it may seem like the way you got to the disgust or the trigger was not a direct route, that you went round in circles a little while, right? I've done that for a long time with the name of the business, right? However, there is a moment that I got to where I understood it because of all the things I'd attempted and experimented to do. So after I realized I cannot do this, I disgusted myself with the idea of how much work it would be to create two websites. The choice came quite clearly of which one I should keep. And I realized I wanted to keep the Get It Done Diva brand and let go of the Women's Business Momentum Center. But there was a final struggle that I had with that will go in the determination column. And that was that I felt like the credibility piece. And I had to come to terms within myself that the Get It Done Diva brand, that myself as a coach had enough credibility without having the words Business Momentum Center in it. I had to come to terms with that and feel like I was good enough without it. in order to be able to let it go. That's where the determination came in. Because I made the choice that I was going to just go with the Get It Done Diva brand. But the final piece was just really believing in myself, in that brand, that would be enough. And now, if we go back to the emotions before and after with the desire column, before before I felt frustrated, I felt like I was unclear. I felt foggy, like I was confusing as too many different brands. And afterwards, after I made that choice, and this is so true, when we know we've made the right choice, because afterwards we're going to feel that landing, that clarity, that sense of relief, the spaciousness that shows up when we know I made the right choice. I'm making the right choice. So are you starting to see a pattern here? So we have a breakthrough. There's a moment of disgust, which is the trigger. Then we have a decision we have to make. We have to choose something differently. What did that look like? Then there's the emotion, the desire before and afterwards. What were those emotions? And then we have determination, which is necessary with a breakthrough. Because in order for us to continue the path, we're going to get lured off it now and again, and determination is what's going to keep us on that path. So this one's the tearjerker coming up now, okay? So this is a really big one. This breakthrough has been brewing for 35 years. And it's something that I've wanted, but it's something that I have not been able to do. And it's around a difficult conversation. Now, many of you know, but in case you don't, I've written about it in many of my books. My One Person Show I was just talking about, I talk about it in there too, that when I was 18 and 19, I attempted suicide twice and I overdosed on tablets. That event has had multiple breakthrough moments throughout my life. And right after that, I left England and I moved to America. And my dad and my stepmom live in America, and my mom and my stepdad are in England. And so I was always wanting to have a heart-to-heart with my mom about what happened. I felt a lot of guilt, a lot of shame around what I'd done, because now, especially as a mother myself, I could see how devastating and how difficult that was for her. And it felt so much shame for so many years. I felt like I had written about it, I'd spoken about it. But what was so strange to me was it was easier for me to stand on a stage for a speaking event or in a performance and talk about what happened than it was to have a conversation with my mom. I'd never really had a conversation about it. I felt like the belief was that I can't talk about the suicide attempts with my mom, right? That was the belief that I had. I have a great relationship with my mom. I love her. I visit almost every year. We talk twice a week on the Zoom and have what we call word of the day. And we are silly, we laugh. She knows the ins and outs of everything about my life. So it's not that we don't talk. It was just this one thing that I believed that I couldn't have that conversation. And so in September, I went home from my annual visit. I ended up getting really sick. And you might have seen the podcast episode where I did it from bed. But I got antibiotics. And I had the antibiotics where I needed to take 4 doses a day. And so I got back from the doctors. It was 11 o'clock, and I needed to get 4 doses in before the end of the day. And so I took 1 dose, went back to bed. I was really out of it, and then came back down maybe 2 hours later, and I was taking the 2nd dose. And my mom said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I've got to get 4 doses in." She's like, "No, you take it every 6 hours." And she was very upset with me. And I said, I want to feel better. I want to be able to have a great trip with you. I'm going to take this 2nd dose. So I took the 2nd dose, carried on the rest of the day, got my 4 doses in, and I was just sleeping in the bedroom. The next morning, she barged into the bedroom, which she hadn't done any other day, with a cup of tea. And she barged in and she said, "You took too many tablets yesterday. I called. they told me it's okay, but you shouldn't have done it. And she bangs the cup of tea down on the side table. She walks back across over to the door. And by now she's crying. And she's like, it's not okay. And I worry about what happened when you were 19 and it was my fault. And she's crumpling. And I'm sick, and she has a condition where she's not supposed to be around anyone that's sick. So we both got masks on. It's like a really awful scene from a movie where these two people love each other so much. She's standing in the doorway of the bedroom. I've got hardly any energy to even have a conversation. We've both got masks on. We're both crying. She's sobbing, and she's telling me that she feels responsible. And I let her know it's not your fault. It's not your fault at all. It was nothing to do with you. I said, but I can't have this conversation right now. And then we started to ease into a lighter conversation, and things were fine, and she left. I knew in that moment I couldn't have that conversation in the way that I wanted to. I wasn't avoiding it. There was in that moment that I told her I can't have this conversation right now, I felt calm, even though I was crying. I didn't feel guilt and I didn't feel shame for the first time. But I knew I couldn't have that conversation in that moment. So a few days passed, things were fine, everything, I was starting to feel better. And it was towards the end of the trip, maybe 10 days later, I brought my mom a cup of tea into her room, and I put it on a table, and I climbed into bed with her. And I said, "You started to have a conversation with me a few days ago." And she said, "Uh-huh." And I could tell even she, at that point, maybe didn't want to have the conversation. It wasn't easy, but we sat and we had the conversation. And we cleared the air, and I let her know how much I loved her and how much it was nothing to do with her in that moment, and how I had healed and how I was not the same person. And she shared with me how she was so proud of me and said it to my stepdad all the time that I was not the same person that I was when I was 19, and that she could see that. But this was a moment where I was able to let go of the guilt, and so was she, because we had that difficult conversation. I could have just glossed it over. I could have not got into bed with her that morning. I could have left on my trip and everything was fine. But I knew that that opening had happened for the conversation, and I wasn't willing to let it close again. And so my determination to reopen the conversation in the bedroom that day was an example of the determination around that breakthrough. I told you it was a big one. I've had 10 pretty significant breakthroughs this year, just this year. And I've been able to identify them because I started doing this last year. And as I see what triggers me, it's always discussed with how I'm feeling, how I'm showing up, what I'm doing. And there are different degrees of disgust. The first thing you want to do is you want to do the taking inventory. You want to rewind. And then you're going to start to notice and see some of the changes that happened. And you're going to be able to pinpoint the breakthroughs. Then you're going to find the trigger, that moment of disgust. What was it? Because the more you can identify that, then in the future, you can feel disgust a little sooner. And maybe you don't have to go to such an extreme before you choose, which is the next column, that decision that you make to do something differently. Then we have the desire, the emotions column, which gives us the emotions before and afterwards, so we can start to really understand how we felt before and how we feel afterwards. Why is this important? Because sometimes we're just so used to feeling that guilt or that fear or that shame that we're living with something because it's familiar. But when we see it in the column with the before and the afterwards, we can begin to understand that the grass is greener on the other side, that we can create change. We can use the vision of what we want to pull us forward. And then finally, that determination column. I like to refer to it as look how awesome I am. Because the determination column, if you just look at what you write in that final column, shows you how badass you are. It shows you that even when things got tough, that you still were able to be determined enough to stick with the breakthroughs that you had began, to keep the choices, to stay the course, and to continue to break through. So that's the anatomy of a breakthrough. Now, what are you going to do with that is the question. Whether it is your weekly goal or whether it is your annual goals that you're setting, anything is a change. It is something that you want to be different. And when you start to see that there needs to be something that you break through, which can be painful, or it could be just a little bit uncomfortable, depending on what level of disgust you allow yourself to get to. When you start to realize that, you're going to see that you can break through so much easier. Whether it's a simple breakthrough like deciding to stick on nails, or having a difficult conversation with someone. Maybe it's that you're going to change your entire business, even though you've invested decades in it, but you really have a desire to do something differently. Whatever it is, I encourage you to explore your breakthroughs so that you can use the anatomy of your own breakthroughs to create change as you step into the next one. So as you move through your weekly momentum this week, you can do this on a small scale as you look at your do-overs and you look at the last week. But I definitely recommend you're going to need more data than that to really look for breakthroughs. Breakthroughs like the ones that I've just shared with you, they don't happen every single week. Often, it's the culmination of many weeks, many months, or even in my case, for some of them, many years of things bubbling up before there's a breakthrough, there's a trigger, there's a change that happens. But if you get into the habit of doing a weekly rewind, you start to see patterns and understand things clearer so that when you do your annual rewind and you look back at the whole year, you can begin to pinpoint the patterns and see things more tangibly and clearly. And then you are setting yourself up to understand yourself, your emotional intelligence even more, so that you can understand what makes you tick. Because ultimately, what happens is that when you understand what makes you tick, you're going to be able to set a clearer trajectory for your future. The Breakthrough Blueprint is part of your breakthrough year. You can get it as a workbook. You can buy the self-paced program. You can do it with me. I love doing the anatomy of the breakthrough with my clients so that we can really zero in on these changes together. Because sometimes maybe you need a different perspective to really see all of the columns and to fill everything out. So maybe you do this with a buddy. Whatever you do, make sure that you are giving yourself an opportunity to level up, because if we don't take the time to rewind, you're going to end up banging your head against the same wall and not breaking through year after year after year, week after week after week. So as you step into momentum this week, go in with your eyes wide open. Embrace disgust. Doesn't have to be something that you shy away from. Notice how it's showing up. It's a great indicator of what you want and what you don't want. In a very easy way, you can begin to flesh out a new vision for your week, for your year, for your future. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for appreciating my stories so that you can maybe dovetail them into your own life, as many of you have told me that you do, so that you can begin to see how to create even more breakthroughs with even more ease as you step into the next year. I will see you next week in Weekly Momentum. Much love.